The hero thought he would end up in a place like an outdoor camp, but it was some kind of solo camp or wilderness survival. There was no one around, not even a village. The guy wondered if everything would be okay. The boy held his open palm out in front of him. Everything should have been fine, since he had crafting equipment. A knife appeared in the boy's hand. First, he needed to get some food. This story began with surviving in the wild forest in another world with only a knife. The guy's name was Himuro Soujiro. He was an ordinary worker who had recently managed to move to Tokyo. For various reasons, he had to change jobs many times. Himuro was 35 years old, but he felt like an old wreck. Like everyone else, he worked like crazy, so much so that his new job gave him overtime leave. Himuro returned home from work late at night. As usual, whether it was because of stupidity or fatigue, the man did not notice a truck appear as he was crossing the road. Naturally, the car hit Himuro. His consciousness was already leaving this world, when suddenly he heard a female voice. The unknown girl asked Himuro if he could hear her. The stranger told the man not to be afraid, and explained that his life had ended because he had been hit by a truck. Himuro asked why he was hearing someone's voice if he had died. The female voice said that it was not that simple, and reminded Himuro that he had once picked up a statue of a goddess and placed it back on the altar. The stranger was that goddess, and had decided to reward the man after his death. Himuro asked doubtfully if the owner of the voice was a goddess. The goddess agreed, but asked him not to think too much about it. She told the man that he was a good man, and she was sorry that such a heavy burden had to fall on his life. For these reasons, the goddess decided to extend Himuro's life and send his soul to another world. The man began to think about the fact that the god gave him the right to create a new preservation. The goddess said that there are many worlds, and asked him what he would like to do. Himuro thought about what he wanted, and answered that he wanted a measured life. Himuro wanted to sleep in his room as much as he wanted, didn't want to ride in a stuffy train full of people in the morning, didn't want to work for a company where he would get overtime for every mistake, and didn't want to eat store-bought food that didn't even have much of a taste. The man remembers how long ago, when he went to the village, he went on a hike, and the food he cooked himself then was the most delicious of all he had ever eaten. He still remembers the wind that swayed the leaves, the crackling of the fire. These sounds healed his wounded soul. Himuro told the goddess that food prepared with his own hands was the most delicious, and that was what he wanted. The goddess exclaimed that it was not for nothing that he had picked up her statuette on that expedition, and said that it was nothing other than fate. The goddess said that she would give Himuro, as a good man, a special gift. It was a sacred weapon called craftsmanship equipment. She showed 2 fingers and said that this weapon had 2 properties. Himuro would be able to create anything, and it would be stored inside his chest. When he wanted to use it, he would have to say the name of the weapon. The man thanked the goddess. The goddess was surprised that Himuro even thanked her for the gift, and said that he was a really good man. She said that it was time for him to go. The goddess told the man not to worry, because she would find the best place for him. The goddess said that her name was Anna, and that she had already given birth to him in another world. She declared that she would bless this soul, and grant this body a sacred weapon. These powers would help the man live happily on the new earth. The goddess smiled, and told Himuro that she would grant him the rest of the powers she had. The man was surprised. After this, Himuro opened his eyes in a new world. Himuro felt good. The fatigue in his body, the tension in his shoulders, the pain in his stomach from stress and gastritis were gone. A healthy body already made the man happy. He thanked the goddess for not only giving him the sacred weapon, but also healing him. Himuro was surprised that he could even squat, but he stopped abruptly, remembering the sacred weapon. The guy said the words about craft equipment, and his palm glowed with a bright light. He was a little surprised. A knife with a black handle appeared in his hand. Himuro finally understood what it looked like, and noticed that the knife fits very comfortably in his hands. When he called the weapon again, it disappeared from his hands. Himuro thought that he could freely summon and put away the weapon, like a hero from a children's anime. The guy figured that out, but the problem was something else entirely. He found himself in the middle of a dense forest with no signs of life around. That wasn't exactly what Himuro wanted. Himuro used his ability again. He certainly liked to go on solo trips, but he ended up alone in the wild. He needed more equipment for the trip. Himuro only had fantasy clothes that weren't suitable for a trip, a sacred knife, and that was it. The boy closed his eyes. Himuro wondered if there was any point in complaining. The basic rules of survival were to not panic and assess the situation, and think about what he could do. The boy thought about it. He looked at his reflection in the blade of the knife. It was a special tool that, according to the goddess, could take any form and return to its owner if he left it somewhere. Himuro decided that this was the right time to try it. He spoke the words to activate his ability. Himuro recalled that this weapon had two properties. One of them was tool. The boy could shape this knife into any tool he wanted. Himuro was surprised. An axe appeared in the boy's hands. Now he was convinced that it really worked. Himuro found himself in a deserted forest with an axe in his hands and decided that he should try it at least once. He swung the axe. Himuro threw the axe at the tree with all his might. The tree trunk instantly shattered into pieces where it hit. A thick trunk of a tall tree began to fall on the motionless Himuro. He was horrified. He had just been reborn and was already on the verge of death. The boy fell to the ground and opened his mouth to scream. Himuro opened his eyes and saw that the tree was no longer falling. The guy was very surprised that it actually stopped. Himuro's second superpower was to improve conditions. The goddess, when telling him about it, suggested imagining a situation where Himuro wanted to build a birdhouse. He would have to hold nails with his fingers to drive them into the wood, or work the wood on a workbench. With this power, all of these things could be done without even thinking about them. For example, if Himuro didn't have a table, he could take a board and hold it in the air. After that, he could use it as he saw fit. If there are no nails for a birdhouse, it's okay, because you can give the object any shape without them. Himuro could cancel the shape he created at any time. This tool literally has control over space and time. When he heard this, Himuro didn't quite understand what it meant and thought that this power was like glue. The goddess said that with the power of tool and improvement of conditions, Himuro had a portable workshop with him and only one item. She hoped that the man understood everything. Himuro said that he would definitely figure it out. He crawled out from under the tree trunk and stood next to it, touching the wood with one hand. The axe was stuck in the ground in the middle of a large crater. Himuro said out loud that he understood everything. The axe disappeared into thin air. The guy awkwardly narrowed his eyes, looking at the knife in his hands. He decided that he had to be very careful with this thing, otherwise he could hurt someone. First, Himuro needed a walking stick. With it, he would be able to lift low tree branches or find snakes underfoot. A walking stick would help when traversing difficult terrain, and could also serve as a sensor for checking the terrain. Himuro found a stick and decided that it would do. First, this stick needed to be shortened. Himuro cut the wood with a sharp movement of the knife. The cut was perfect. The guy decided to move on to processing here. He remembered how he had previously struggled to shorten the stick with an ordinary knife. The stick needed to be stripped of all its bark. The work was done quickly. Himuro said he didn't have much experience with it, but it was done well. He spent less than 5 minutes on it. The quick work, the perfect cut, even though Himuro hadn't really done it, was the power of the craftsman's equipment. The boy was working the small piece of wood in his hands. Himuro made a handle. He connected it to the stick, using the power of improving conditions. The walking stick was ready. Himuro decided to test how well the condition enhancement worked. He started swinging his walking stick from side to side and hitting it against trees. Now, no matter what he did to it, nothing happened. This meant that no physical consequences would change its shape. Neither the handle nor the stick were damaged. However, the boy could cancel the enhancement at any time. A knife that could turn into anything while being very sharp, the fixing power of any object was simply incredible. Himuro gripped the cane in his hands. With the power of the craftsman's equipment, he could easily survive in this forest. Once Himuro was done with the cane, it was time to start exploring. They needed to find a body of water. The maximum a person could live without water was 3 days. If they didn't drink for a whole day, they could get dehydrated and dizzy. The boy was, of course, afraid to walk through the unknown dense forests, but he reassured himself that he had once spent the night in the wilderness. This was the world to which the goddess had sent him. Himuro thought that if he went forward, this path would lead him to something good, although there was no civilization there. But every day, going to work early in the morning, he felt that with each step he was about to fall, merging with the mud. Now Himuro was free. The rumble of his stomach was heard. Himuro noticed that he was hungry and wondered when he had eaten last. He needed to find himself some food. The boy had been exploring this forest for a long time. He stopped, his eyes wide open, looking somewhere ahead. Himuro finally found a body of water. The water seemed clean. He found a river, but he didn't want to drink. Himuro decided that now he would know where he could drink clean water. Himuro had to make a tent. It could get cold at night, and he needed a place to sleep. He reasoned that if he built a camp near a river, it would be cool. A clearing among trees was the ideal place. After deciding on the location, he had to build a structure out of 3 sticks and some kind of rope. The hardest part was securing the top of the structure. With his crafting equipment, Himuro was able to build and erect a tent frame without rope. He credited his ability to improve conditions. To protect himself from rain and wind, Himuro covered the frame with thick leaves. The ground absorbs heat very quickly, so the boy did not recommend sleeping on it. To conserve heat, he placed thick branches inside and put leaves and grass on them. The tent was ready. Himuro sat inside, placing his hands on his bent knees. He again called the crafting equipment very useful. In fact, building a tent always takes a long time. You have to find branches of the right length and width, and also process them. But it only took the guy an hour to build this tent, and that's assuming he worked non-stop to finish before sunset. Himuro stretched contentedly, closing his eyes. He was glad that he now had a healthy body. An unknown noise was heard from the side. Himuro turned towards it. A hare with a horn on its forehead came out of the trees. Himuro was surprised to see this animal. The animal was of medium size. Himuro did not think that it could be dangerous. The hare noticed the boy, and he tensed up. The animal suddenly attacked Himuro. The boy managed to put his walking stick in front of him, and the hare hit the stick with its horn. Himuro shouted the name of the craft equipment. Now that the hare's horn was embedded in the handle, Himuro used the condition enhancement to make it so that the animal couldn't pull out its horn. Himuro put down his cane and walked away a few steps, crossing his arms over his chest. He told the hare that he lived in a village, and for that reason he should not be underestimated. He said that all wild animals are naturally hostile to a new stimulus, so when you see a new animal, you should not underestimate it. Himuro closed his eyes. A drop of sweat was running down his face. He began to think about what had happened. His body moved very quickly, coordinated with his thoughts. Himuro put his palms together in a prayerful gesture and thanked the goddess out loud, saying that it was all thanks to her. He thanked her for the food. As if understanding these words, the hare began to make noise and spin around. Himuro turned to him. He was afraid that he would not survive in the other world. The hare lowered its ears and stared at the boy with shining eyes. Himuro smiled, but told the animal not to try, because his whining wouldn't stop him anyway. The new world turned out to be very cool. Sometime later, Himuro was squatting on the riverbank. He was surprised that the hare did not have any poison glands. The boy put all the internal organs of the animal in a wooden container. He noticed that the hare's heart was strangely shaped, but otherwise its insides were the same as those of a normal hare. Himuro skinned the hare and decided to wash its carcasses in water to finally get rid of blood and possible ticks and insects. There was a rustling sound in the bushes behind him. Himuro turned around decisively, clutching his cane. He assumed that the scent of blood had attracted wild animals. A puppy with dark fur came out onto the shore. He looked at Himuro with his tongue hanging out. The guy did not expect to see a puppy at all, and lowered his cane. Himuro smiled widely as he called the dog over. He asked where his parents were, thinking how cute the puppy was. He thought there were no other dogs around, so he assumed it had gotten separated from the pack, wondering what to do with it. Himuro asked the puppy if it was hungry. The boy pointed to the container with the rabbit's entrails and said that he could eat it. The puppy noticed the food and buried his muzzle in the container. Himuro asked if it was tasty and then noticed a bow on the animal's neck. Himuro began to guess the reason for the puppy's appearance alone in the forest. The animal straightened up and looked at the guy, licking its lips. Himuro had the feeling that the puppy had chewed bones. The puppy barked and then ran into the bushes. Himuro crouched down to pick up the wooden container and thought that the puppy must have an owner since he had a ribbon tied around his neck. The boy looked into the container. He realized with bewilderment that the dog had eaten only the heart. Suddenly, a girl with light hair tied in a high ponytail appeared on the shore. She had a bow in her hands and a quiver with arrows hanging on her side. She had long, elven ears. Himuro looked up when he saw the girl. He realized that she was an elf. The stranger asked the boy if he had seen the little one with the bow. Himuro thought that the girl was the puppy's owner, and smiled. He started talking about the puppy. The girl interrupted Himuro in fear, pointing with a trembling hand at the wooden container he was holding. She stuttered and asked if he had butchered the dog. The boy, surprised, began to deny it. He quickly said that the container contained the entrails of another animal and pointed in the direction in which the dog had run. The girl raised her palm to her chest, smiled, and thanked God. The stranger apologized to Himuro for misunderstanding everything and said that she ran to catch a puppy. The guy wished her luck in a friendly manner. The girl smiled widely and thanked Himuro for this. She began to jump from one tree to another, rising higher and higher. The guy watched this. For the first time, he saw a real elf. After some time, to survive in the wild, you need food, water, shelter, clothing, and fire. To make a fire, you need dry branches and grass. Himuro even managed to find resin. Thanks to the crafting equipment, he was able to make the rest. Himuro even managed to light a fire on his first try. Lighting a fire with a bow is done by rotating a sharpened stick with the bowstring.
I would be very happy if you subscribed to the channel, liked and wrote a comment, rating this manga on a scale from 1 to 10. Your opinion is very important to me. This will help me better understand what my audience is interested in, because you are really important to me.
And the friction of the wood against the dry leaves and the stick creates a fire. After Himuro got the fire, he had to boil the water. The guy made a container out of tree bark. It could be used without boiling anything inside above 100 degrees Celsius. To make this container, the guy removed a thin layer of bark from trees of the required length, then softened it with water, and let the structure dry in the sun. It was in this container that the rabbit's entrails were kept. Himuro also made the bowstring out of bark, twisting it very, very thinly. Himuro brought the container with the steaming contents to his face. He carefully tasted the water. The guy realized that it did not have any strange taste. It was ordinary boiled water. Now it was time to prepare the meat. For this, Himuro needed wood coals and a stone slab. In fact, a regular flat stone would have worked. But Himuro thought about it. He wondered if this knife could cut wood as easily as a guy cutting tofu. Would it cut stone as easily, or would it break? So he made a stone slab. Himuro seared the meat on both sides, then placed it on a wooden plate. To make a hair steak, Himuro recommended using the back part. It was the most delicious. The boy folded his hands in a prayerful gesture and wished himself a pleasant meal. He cut the steak and stabbed it with his fork, then put it in his mouth. Himuro chewed the meat, and his eyes widened. His mouth filled with meat juice with each bite. Usually, hare meat is dry and somewhat similar to chicken fillet, but this hare's meat was fatty and sweet, similar to duck meat. Himuro exclaimed that it was very tasty. He cut himself another piece of steak. There was no salt, pepper, or any other seasoning in this meat. However, the meat still tasted incredible. Himuro smiled blissfully. It was ordinary meat, cooked over charcoal on a stone slab, but he felt like he was eating haute cuisine. As he bit into the steak, the boy said that he should also grill the thigh. The fire gave off a lot of heat. The pleasant crackling of coals could be heard in the air. Himuro enjoyed the incredible taste of the food he had just cooked and was alone with himself. It was simply an indescribable feeling from the meal. The guy was sitting near the fire, and the light of the flame illuminated his happy face, reflected in his eyes. When surviving in the wild, you have to follow the rule of 3. You die if your fever doesn't go down for 3 hours. You die if you don't drink for 3 days. You die if you don't eat for 3 weeks. Himuro's crafting equipment allowed him to survive without any problems. He even got himself some cooking utensils, made himself a shelter and a bed, and reinforced the shelter with extra wooden planks. Himuro decided that he should make more cutlery and expand his house, but was distracted by a noise from the side. He turned his head and saw a puppy with a bow around its neck. It barked. The boy wondered where the elf who was looking for him was. The puppy playfully tilted its head to the side. Himuro thought again about how cute the dog was. The boy didn't understand how he could ignore such a face. He extended his hand to the puppy and asked if it was lost. The dog came closer, sniffing Himuro's fingers, and allowed him to scratch its chin. Himuro asked the puppy if it wanted to eat. The animal barked. The boy propped his head up with his hand and looked at the puppy. He said that they would have to find the puppy's owner, but decided that they would do that in the morning. Himuro lay down in the tent, put his hands under his head. The puppy curled up, lying on his stomach. The next morning, it was already the second day of Himuro's stay in a completely different world. He still had a lot to do, but first he had to return the puppy to its rightful owner. The puppy climbed onto the boy's shoulder and tried to lick his ear. Himuro laughed and asked the dog not to eat him. Himuro left marks in the form of crosses on the trees so as not to get lost. The puppy could not run far from the owner, which meant that she lived somewhere nearby. Himuro met only one elf, and he wondered if other races lived here. The elf girl sat on the rocks near the river, wiping her leg from the water. Cleansing her body helped her become a new version of herself. Suddenly, the puppy heard something, and so jumped off Himuro's shoulder and ran to the side, baring his teeth. The boy did not immediately understand what had happened to the animal, and then assumed that there was an enemy nearby. He squeezed the walking stick in his hands tighter. A loud squeal was heard. Himuro assumed it was an animal squeal and someone was fighting. It sounded more like a battle cry than a cry. Suddenly, the boy thought that the elf girl might be in danger. He called the puppy after him and ran towards the sound. The bird of prey threateningly waved its clawed paws. The girl protected herself from the bird with a magic spell. The magic beam kept the griffin at a distance from the elf. The bird recovered from another blow, and the girl said discontentedly that her opponent was strong. The puppy began to bark to attract attention. The bird of prey and the elf turned their attention to the puppy and Himuro. The guy waved his hand in the air to attract attention to himself too. The griffin changed its target and flew towards Himuro. Himuro was pleased that it flew towards him. He decided to hit the bird with the hammer and leave it in the air, like he did with the hare. Himuro swung, threw the hammer at the griffin, and shouted the name of the crafting equipment. The hammer hit the griffin right. Beads of sweat ran down Himuro's face in surprise. He quietly called out the ability to improve conditions. The hammer returned to the boy's hands. He covered his eyes with his hand and said that it was a weapon of mass destruction. Such power was too great. The girl was amazed at the quick victory. She asked Himuro who he was if he could kill a griffin with one blow. The elf noticed that she and the boy had not seen each other since yesterday, and wished him a good morning. Himuro awkwardly wished her the same. The puppy ran to his mistress. Himuro felt uncomfortable because the girl stood in front of him, wrapped in a short towel. She waved at the boy. The elf smiled widely and asked Himuro if he was really a human, or a god of war who decided to set foot on their land. She apologized for being in such a state, and explained that a griffin attacked her during her morning bath. Himuro raised his hands, showing open palms, and turned his head away. He called the main thing that no one was hurt, and said that he was an ordinary person. The girl noted that an ordinary person could not defeat the griffin with one blow. The stunned bird lay near the tree. Himuro handed the girl his sweater. She thanked him and said that she did not know what to do with what was in the towel. The elf threw her hand behind her head and told Himuro that he had really helped her out because she only had 2 daggers left of her weapons. She held these daggers in her other hand. The girl said that she would repay Himuro in double amount. The guy said that she shouldn't do that and picked up the puppy. He said that thanks to this baby he slept in warmth, and now he came to return it to its rightful owner. The girl said that this puppy was abandoned by its parents and it was hard for it to survive alone. That's why she took it in. Elf patted the puppy on the top of its head. Himuro called it Lucky. The elf remembered to introduce herself. She turned out to be a high elf who lived in this forest, named Misty. She asked the boy what his name was. The boy was holding a puppy that was climbing onto his shoulder. He introduced himself as Himuro Soujiro and said that he had only arrived in the forest yesterday and was an ordinary man. Misty changed into her clothes. She apologized for the wait, but was glad that her clothes were finally dry. Himuro remarked that she looked great. The girl's cheeks were slightly red. She called Soujiro a flatterer and suggested that he was a womanizer. The guy replied that she was just saying it as a fact. Misty thanked him for the compliment. Misty brought up the problem. The battle with the griffin had left all of her belongings shattered into pieces, leaving only her clothes and a few other items. Luca was also finished. Himuro asked if there was a village nearby. He could accompany Misty to restock her supplies. The girl's arms were crossed over her chest. She was surprised and replied that there were no settlements nearby. Misty added that she had been living alone for about 10 years. Himuro scratched his head, saying that he shouldn't have asked about the village. Misty waved him off, saying that everything was fine, and that she had left her home quite a long time ago and had chosen to live in this forest of her own free will. Misty explained that the ancestor of the elves blessed this forest, calling it sacred. She added that his descendants did not end up settling in this place. The girl said that the forest was inhabited by creatures that could not be found anywhere else, and that trees grew there that could not be seen anywhere else. This was a forest where no race had lived for 1,000 years, For Misty, survival in this other world was a challenge. Himuro was interested in these words. He asked about how this forest could be untouched for 1,000 years. Misty looked at the boy with surprise. She asked if he knew. The elf pointed to the knife mark on the tree trunk. She said that the trees were as strong as stone, and it wasn't just the trees. The monsters here were just as strong. This forest was built during the Age of Gods, but when it ended, none of the races could survive here due to the harsh conditions. Himuro looked at the knife in his hands and easily stabbed it into the tree trunk. Misty smiled. Then her expression changed, and she aggressively plunged her dagger into the same tree next to the guy's knife. The dagger only went into the wood a couple of centimeters, while Himuro's knife was stuck in up to the hilt. The girl fell to her knees and hit the ground with her fists, saying that she had lost dry. Himuro picked up his knife and said that it was his weapon, not his physical strength. The puppy licked his mistress on the cheek, and she raised her head. Misty stood up abruptly and bowed from the waist. She exclaimed that Himuro was a god-branded man and apologized for her rude behavior. The boy bowed from the waist as well, but apologized and said that he did not understand what she was talking about. Misty explained that he was a man who had been given a sacred weapon. In this world, people treated such people as priests. Himuro thought that he underestimated the value of the thing he possessed. He told Misty that he would not mind if she continued to address him as usual. The elf smiled widely. Misty made a victory sign with 2 fingers and asked Himuro if she could get him some salt. She said that she had some in one of her stashes, so she could share. Without salt, a human wouldn't survive either. If there was only meat, it wouldn't be a problem, but in any case, it was better to have salt on hand than to have none at all. Himuro told Misty that she didn't have to repay him. She exclaimed that she did. Misty suddenly approached Himuro's face and shook her fist at him, saying that not only did he save her from the griffin, but he also brought her lost puppy back, so she should repay him in full. The girl disappeared into the forest, shouting at the guy to wait, because she would be back soon. Himuro stood awkwardly in place with the puppy. Even though all of Misty's camp equipment had been destroyed, she still found the strength to repay Soujiro with kindness. Himuro repeated these words in his head once more, and remembered the goddess thanking him for his kindness. This made him smile. Himuro rolled up the sleeves of his clothes. He decided that he should also thank Misty by cooking food. After gathering all the ingredients, the greens had to be washed in cold water and then thrown into hot water. Himuro gathered several types of greens that vaguely resembled what he ate in the previous world. It looked like green mustard, green onions, watercress, and parsley. The guy thought that they were edible. Yesterday, Himuro had already done the necessary tests to see if the herbs were edible. He had sniffed them, rubbed them with his fingers, and tasted them. The boy's body was fine, which meant that the herbs were edible. However, Himuro's body had been blessed by the goddess, so he shouldn't follow his example. Misty appeared on the shore and apologized for the wait. The girl was carrying a bag in her hands and suddenly asked the guy if he was cooking something. Himuro replied that he had caught a rabbit and wanted to cook it. He asked Misty if she had brought salt. The elf agreed and held out a large piece of rock salt in her palms. She thanked Himuro for saving her. The guy folded his hands in a praying gesture and said that he would gladly accept this gift. Misty exclaimed that it was a small thing, and she hadn't yet properly repaid the boy for saving her. The girl also said that her repayment might be delayed, because now she can only use magic and daggers. Himuro asked if she could buy weapons from the human settlement. Misty replied that there was no such village nearby, and she had nothing to trade with. She sat down, resting her chin on both hands, and looked at the puppy. She thought out loud that she didn't know if she could take care of the dog now, since she had to feed herself too. The girl apologized to Soujiro and said that she was acting strange again. The guy brushed her off, saying that he also loved dogs and understood everything. Misty called him a good person. Himuro replied that she was good then too. The girl was curious about what he was cooking and came closer. She asked Himuro if he wanted to cook a rabbit. The guy replied that he was making broth. To make a broth from rabbit meat, Himuro threw the spine and ribs into the water. After boiling, you need to gradually remove the foam and continue to cook on low heat. After the aroma of the soup opens up, you can remove the bones and add the meat. The guy also thought about filtering the soup from fat after this. Misty thoughtfully repeated the unfamiliar name. The girl awkwardly asked Himuro what broth was. He was amazed to think that in this world, no one made broth. Himuro scratched his neck and looked away, telling Misty that she could try it if she was interested. The girl was very happy and asked again if she could eat with him. The guy didn't know if Misty would like the food, so he warned her right away. Misty said that she couldn't help but like it because it was a rabbit dish. She exclaimed that such delicacies were usually served to aristocrats. Himuro thought about it. And then, when Misty looked at him, asked how she would cook a rabbit if she were in his place. The elf replied that she would skin it and roast it over a fire, and feed the bones and entrails to the dog. She also said that if she had more spices, she could go extravagant. The girl's food reminded Himuro of English cuisine. For example, a hastily made solyanka, or fried fish, with a huge amount of spices to his taste. Himuro said that the food would be ready soon, and suggested that Misty go and play with the puppy. The girl went towards the forest. The guy mentally apologized to Misty, but he came from a world where food was a gourmet art, and therefore could not eat such simple food. The food was ready in no time. Himuro grilled rabbit fillet with green mustard sauce and served it with green onions and watercress, and also made rabbit soup with parsley. Misty was pleasantly surprised. The elf took the plate in her hands and was surprised, because for the first time she saw crystal clear soup. Misty's reflection looked at her from the plate. She blew on the soup and the spoon, and carefully tasted it. The girl's eyes widened in pleasure. She exclaimed that the soup was delicious, and that she had not eaten food like this for ages. Himuro smiled at these words. The salt balance had been replenished, and the meat was excellent. The boy thought that if they were in Japan, these rabbits would quickly become popular game. Himuro chewed a piece of steak and said that the meat tasted better than yesterday. Misty smiled and suggested that he was just having a good day. Himuro thought that the elf's presence made the food taste better. Misty closed her eyes and chewed the tasty meat. Himuro smiled, agreeing that it had been a good day. After eating, Misty remembered something and called Soujiro. She took the puppy in her hands and told the boy that he should give this baby a name. The boy was surprised. Misty said that it was not every day that you get to receive a name from a god-branded one, and it would be akin to a blessing. Both the puppy and the girl looked at Himuro with a look full of anticipation. The boy thought about it. A few seconds later, Himuro named the puppy Matsukaze. The dog barked. Maeda Toshimase's favorite horse was named Matsukaze. There is even a joke that says that Maeda tricked his uncle into taking a cold bath, and while he was doing so, he stole the horse. It is unknown whether this is true or not. Himuro couldn't tell Misty that he had decided to name the puppy that because they had found the girl while taking a bath. So he said that in his world, a very popular horse had that name. The elf said that it was a nice name. Himuro brought up the griffin and asked if they could take something from it, like meat for cooking. The girl agreed, but said that the meat of the bird was very smelly. Misty thought for a moment and added that they could pick up claws and magic stones. Himuro asked about magic stones. It turned out that this stone was formed inside the beast's body and gave it strength. It was located in the meat sac on the heart and was a vital point. The girl added that they were usually collected because they were considered valuable material, but this time the stone was unlikely to be of any value. Himuro did not understand these words. The elf admitted that she had already gone and collected the magic stone, namely, what was left of it after Soujiro's blow. Misty showed the shiny fragments in her palms. The guy realized that next time he should aim for the head. The girl warned him that not all monsters would die immediately when hit in the head, and asked if she could feed the remains of the stone to Matsukaze. Himuro did not mind, but asked if the puppy would eat it. Misty reminded him that even though the dog was small, he was still a monster. She thought that his mother gave birth to Matsukaze prematurely, and therefore, to replenish his strength, the elf fed him magic stones. Himuro realized what the sound was when Matsukaze ate the rabbit's heart. The girl showed her friend the griffin's claws. She said that the griffin's claws had disinfectant properties. Misty explained that if you add the claws to the water you want to drink, they will kill all the harmful microbes, and if you wash your wounds with this water, they will heal faster. You can also stick the claw into raw meat, and it will last longer and not rot. Himuro suggested dividing the claws equally. The girl was surprised, because she thought he would collect everything. Soujiro said that this was not prudent, and if they got lost, then everyone could take care of themselves with their help. Misty smiled and said that they would do so. Himuro noticed that Matsukaze was already having fun with himself. Misty called Soujiro and told him that her camp had been destroyed. She asked if he would mind if she built a new camp next to his. Misty thought that Matsukaze would be lonely without a boyfriend too, and that they would see each other more often. Himuro thought that he would be lonely without a puppy too, and that it would be quite convenient to be with Misty. He had no reason to refuse, but he was unsure about this decision. The elf suddenly added that the boy would be better off with her than without her. She stood up and asked Soujiro if he came from another world. He didn't know everything about the other world yet, and he could rely on Misty. Himuro asked the girl if she would help him. Misty raised her fist to her chest and exclaimed with a smile that they would be surprised together. Himuro looked at the girl who stood in a proud pose. He smiled and asked what it meant. Misty reminded him that the boy was at school when he saw her. Soujiro agreed and said that it was the first time he met an elf. The girl said that she was also surprised when she saw him by the river. She parodied her surprise. All she could think of was how a man appeared in the forest. Himuro laughed. Misty said that they were surprised together. The elf leaned towards the boy sitting on the ground with the puppy. Himuro hadn't laughed heartily for a long time. Misty asked the boy again about his decision and said that it would be much more fun together. At that moment, Himuro was reborn. So much was happening to him at once that he couldn't keep up with everything around him. Subconsciously, he wanted his luck to stop. He was afraid that something terrible would happen in the future, and he was avoiding opportunities. Himuro called Misty's name. The boy told the elf that he would rely on her. Himuro needed to take the first step towards that very future. Misty smiled and told the boy that she was glad to be his neighbor. Matsukaze barked, as if taking part in the conversation. Misty, admiring the pet, asked if he would help them too. Soujiro told the puppy that they believed in him. Misty's shelter was destroyed after a monster attack, and Himuro had no feelings for his. Considering these factors, Soujiro and Misty decided to build themselves a normal house. The girl said that she would go and inspect the area for monsters, and suggested that Himuro cut down trees. She asked Himuro not to cut down trees with unusual crowns. The guy agreed. Soujiro also thanked the elf for the magic amulet. He said that in gratitude for it, he would build a good house. Misty asked the boy if he was sure, since it was a small payment. Himuro clenched his fist and reminded the girl that it was a divine relic, so it was more than a worthy payment. The elf agreed and said that she was ready to help if needed. Soujiro waved goodbye to Misty and Matsukaze and rolled up his sleeves to get to work. It was necessary to start from the ground.
I would be very happy if you subscribed to the channel, liked and wrote a comment, rating this manga on a scale from 1 to 10. Your opinion is very important to me. This will help me better understand what my audience is interested in, because you are really important to me.
First, it had to be dug up with a shovel, then redug. After that, it was possible to level it. Having finished preparing the ground, Himuro decided to take care of the materials. The tree had to be cut down in the direction it was supposed to fall. A small wedge-shaped depression had to be made to make it easier to lay them down later. With this method, the tree would collapse under its own weight, and this was very convenient. For Soujiro, the main thing was not to overdo it, otherwise the tree could fall in an unknown direction, and that's very bad. It took the guy a few tries to figure out how to do it right, and after that, the speed of his work increased sometime later. Misty returned and was surprised to see the amount of work Himuro had done. She asked if he had used magic. Himuro asked if he looked like a wizard. The elf wondered how he had cut down so many trees in such a short time. Misty awkwardly asked Himuro if he needed her help. The boy asked her to help carry the logs to the camp, and she enthusiastically agreed. Together they carried the logs to the future site of their home. In this way, they carried all the logs. Misty asked what to do next. First, Soujiro and Misty built the frame of their house from the logs they brought. After that, they sawed them in half lengthwise, and these were the walls. Cutting the logs was difficult, which the guy got to do. Using his abilities, Himuro fixed the logs in the air, using them as a ladder. The girl laughed because the trees were flying. Himuro agreed, and thought that it looked like a bug in the game. Next, it was necessary to build a roof and a ceiling. Himuro and Misty decided to make it from tree bark and small tree cuts. The guy used his skills to increase the strength of the house. All that was left was to cover it with some roofing material, and the roof would be ready. Soujiro entered the house and frowned that it was too dark inside. Misty peeked through the doorway and said that she could help with the lighting. She used magic to create a glowing ball that flew up to the ceiling. Soujiro was surprised by this and asked if she could teach him how to do it. Misty said that she did not feel any mana in him. She apologized and added that he was an ordinary person and could not use magic. Himuro was a little disappointed. The elf said that with the help of some divine relics, he might be able to do it. Himuro cut a hole in the wall. He used his skills to strengthen the stone and earth, and built a fireplace there. He processed the stones he got so that everything would be easy to build. There was no longer a need to go outside to light a fire or cook food. All that was left was to make a drain. Thanks to it, the bottom of the house would not wash away if it rained. When Soujiro finished his work, Matsukaze ran up to him and barked. His dark fur was covered in dirt. Himuro picked up the pet and said that he needed to be washed. The puppy tried to get out of his hands. The guy washed Matsukaze's paws and said that he had worked hard. After that, the guy sat down on a rock near the water, putting his bare feet in the river. He enjoyed the coolness of the water and suddenly heard Misty calling him. The girl appeared on the shore and happily reported that she had checked the soil and it was quite fertile. Soujiro was surprised at how quickly she had done it. Misty said that now they could grow vegetables and they wouldn't have to go and pick them. She said that was good and sat close to the guy. He tensed up a little. Misty dipped her bare feet into the water. She said she was sorry she could only gather materials, but was glad Himuro could do more. Soujiro awkwardly looked away and said her help with the lighting was already useful. Misty exclaimed that it was unfair. Unlike the flame, this light did not emit any fire or smoke, and the amount of light was the same as the LED lights on the ground. Himuro realized that Misty thought she owed him a favor. The girl agreed that making something with her own hands was very interesting. She admitted that for some reason she felt very good in her soul. Misty asked if it was because she was next to him. The elf, called Soujiro by name, came close to his face and suddenly exclaimed that she saw a wooden shovel for the first time. Her eyes were full of delight. Himuro explained that it was a shovel. Misty clarified that it was a scoop, and a shovel looks different. Himuro denied it. He said that every scoop can be called a shovel, but not every shovel a scoop. The girl was very surprised. The guy laughed. Misty nudged him with her shoulder in displeasure. Soujiro, laughing, said that due to regional differences, both could be called either. After some time, Himuro got busy with the clay that Misty had dug for him. If you mix clay, dry grass, sand, and water, and then bring it to the desired hardness, you get an improvised solution. The guy mixed it all in the dug hole. He covered the walls of the barn with this solution, and thus got rid of drafts. At the very end, Himuro hung a sheet of bark, and it became a door. The work was finished for today, which he informed Misty. The girl was happy. Misty was surprised that Soujiro had done so much work in one day and asked if she could really live in the house too. He said that she had helped and so she had every right. He said that he would make a more suitable bed tomorrow. There was a bed in the corner of the house now, made of a sheet of bark stretched over a wooden frame and grass dried over a fire. Misty had made it. She called Himuro vulgar. He asked why. The girl explained that men who were careful about their bed spent a lot of time in brothels. Upon hearing this, Himuro replied that Misty was the one who was dirty, not him. Sometime later, Misty knocked and asked Soujiro if he was asleep or not. The guy allowed her to enter. The girl looked into the house. Himuro was sitting on the bed and playing with Matsukaze. Misty thought that he forgot to turn off the light and wanted to do it, so she came. The guy said that he would soon go to bed and he was almost done. Misty asked with interest what he was doing. Soujiro answered that it was not so important, but he thought he should do it. While he was talking to the elf, the puppy licked his cheek. Misty picked up the wooden statue and excitedly asked if it was the goddess Soujiro had met. She said it was very beautiful. The goddess was a woman with her eyes closed, holding a sphere in her hands. Himuro looked at his hands and said that he had not seen Anna's face or figure. He had just thought of her voice, and his hands moved by themselves. Misty smiled and said that he had improvised, and added that it had turned out beautifully. She was sure that the goddess would have liked it too. Himuro would have been happy if the goddess could see this statue. Misty asked if the boy knew the name of the goddess. Himuro thought about it and said that she introduced herself as Anna. Anna was the mother goddess of the divine ancestors. The girl thought about it and repeated the name. She said nonchalantly that she had not heard of such a thing and suggested that if they found an elf older than her, he would know. Himuro was silent, clutching the statue in his hands. The boy remembered the goddess's words about her spending her last strength on him. He believed that if Anna had sent a more ambitious person, more people would have known about her. Himuro doubted that spending her last strength on a person like him was the right decision. Misty smiled and said that Anna was a strong goddess. Himuro asked why. The elf explained that instead of ambition, destiny, and glory, the goddess chose Soujiro's kindness. The girl spread her arms out to the sides and assumed that Anna had always been like this. even when she disappeared, that she had not given up her views. Himuro saw a palm appear before his eyes, which the goddess extended to him. Misty called Anna a strong and kind goddess, and said that she liked that about her. Soujiro thought about the goddess's action. The goddess told the boy to live a happy life, but for some reason Himuro thought too much about it. He was worried that he was violating Anna's wishes. Misty sat down on the bed next to the guy and said that the goddess probably liked him. The elf told Soujiro that he had good hobbies. The guy asked if she really thought so. The girl agreed. Himuro finished the statue and placed it on a small board near the ceiling, using it as a shelf. He stood in front of it and folded his hands in a prayer gesture. The elf praised her friend and said that he had done well. Soujiro thanked Misty for sitting with him and said that he was going to bed. The girl replied that she would dim the light, and a little later it would disappear completely. She touched the magic ball with her finger. Misty bowed from the waist to the statue of the goddess Anna. She wished Soujiro good night and thanked him for building the house. Himuro wished the elf good night in return and thanked him for sitting with him. He raised his head and looked at the statue. Himuro wanted to eat delicious food in a comfortable environment, and thanks to the goddess, he had all of that. Himuro thanked the goddess and decided that from tomorrow, he would begin to gradually settle in. The next morning, Himuro's face was covered in sweat. He asked Misty to repeat what she had just said. The girl asked, confused, if they would wash together a little earlier. A female voice said a friendly good morning to Soujiro. The boy thought sleepily that it was already morning. Suddenly he felt something soft and warm on himself. Strange sounds began to be heard in the room. They made Himuro open his eyes. Misty stood on the shore. She wished Gloomy good morning again. The boy's face was wet. He wished the elf a good morning in return. Misty asked if Matsukaze had woken Soujiro. The boy said that thanks to him, he woke up quickly. He took a few sips of water. Himuro was surprised that the water with the griffin's claw actually became cleaner. The guy said that you can wash yourself with this water and took another sip. Misty exclaimed that she wanted to do it too, and then went up to the guy and asked if they would wash together. Himuro asked what she said. The girl repeated her question and asked if he had heard. Himuro, shocked, asked if she was joking. Misty asked if the guy was the type to wash once a week, and said that she liked to wash every day. The guy replied that he felt weak when he washed every day and once a week was better. Misty exclaimed that this was great and called him to follow her. It is better to wash in the open, in pairs. 2 people accompany each other. One washes while the other stands guard. Misty said that monsters can attack while you wash. Himuro understood that this is a countermeasure against monsters. The girl apologized and added that it was necessary to explain everything from the beginning. Misty smiled and said that she trusted Soujiro, and that's why she invited him along. The boy held Matsukaze in his arms and thought that he had nothing to worry about. Misty washed herself while flying high in the air. Himuro looked at her from behind and thought that improved vision was a great thing. The girl finished, dried her body with a towel, and told the guy that it was his turn. He agreed. The elf handed him a towel. Soujiro clarified that it was her towel. Misty, who had managed to change her clothes, explained that she had dried herself with this towel and she had no other cloth. She decided to lend it to her boyfriend. Himuro remembered how the elf had dried her body with this towel. Misty began to dry her long hair with a spell that created a strong flow of air. The guy said it was convenient. The elf noted that Soujiro was always surprised by magic. She said that with its help, hair and clothes can be dried quickly. It was an extremely useful thing. Misty suggested Himuro take his clothes off by the river so she could wash his clothes. He shook his head and firmly stated that he would bring them after the bath. The guy took off his clothes. He decided to cover his bottom with a towel and dry himself with a shirt, and then let it dry. The water was cold, but Himuro was grateful for the coolness. There were even fish splashing in the river. Misty and Soujiro washed up successfully. For breakfast, they ate char fried on a stone pan. Misty asked Himuro during breakfast what his plans were. The guy said that he wanted to make this place more comfortable for living and cut down trees to make furniture. Himuro said that if Misty didn't mind, he would leave the hunting to her. The girl smiled happily and said that she could be relied upon. She wanted to teach Matsukaze how to hunt. Misty asked what the boy would do. Soujiro decided to start with the table and chairs. The puppy ran his paw along the log they were sitting on. Himuro said that it was quite low here, and Matsukaze was constantly trying to steal food. For this reason, a normal table was needed. First, it was necessary to decide what kind of table the guy would make. He began to figure out what to do. Soujiro decided to make 2 thin plates with a slit in the center. These would be the legs. This would make the table stable and would be able to stand on the ground better. It would also be a convenient table that could be carried. Himuro inserted one board into another and covered it with a third one. The table was ready. The guy looked at it and said that it turned out well. If this table were disassembled, it would be very convenient to store. Himuro reasoned that now he needed a large chair and chairs, and then it would be nice to make doors, windows, and a place to cook. He also needed a shelf for storage. Soujiro desperately thought that it would be easier if he had paper and a pen. He wanted to write down everything he needed. Himuro was busy assembling the chairs, making sure everything was straight and correct. He treated the wood of the finished products with courtesy. The kitchen table and 2 chairs were ready. Misty called Soujiro and asked him to look at something. The elf held a large insect in her hands with a wide smile. She exclaimed that she had brought a silk moth. Himuro shouted in shock about what kind of monster it was. Misty replied that it was rude to call an animal spirit a monster. The boy asked about this animal spirit. The animal spirits were different from ordinary living beings. It was like a creature from a fairy tale world that suddenly appeared. Misty explained it more simply, adding that they were very rare creatures. Himuro asked why they needed him. Misty explained that the fluffy insect had flown in on its own, and she had found it in Soujiro's room. The moth said that it wanted to live there. The boy was surprised and asked the elf if she could talk to it. Misty explained that she couldn't really talk to them, but she could understand what they wanted to convey. The silk moth saw the kitchen table and lay down on its surface. Himuro looked questioningly at the animal spirit. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared above the butterfly's head. A few seconds later, a silk cloth appeared in the butterfly's paws. Soujiro was surprised. It was as if the animal spirit was handing the silk to the boy. Himuro took the silk in his hands and asked Misty if the insect wanted to live with them. She agreed and asked the boy's opinions. Soujiro said that he was not against it and added that he did not expect to find any fabric. He approvingly told the moth to live with them. The silk moth made a sound in response. Himuro said that he understood it too and asked if it meant something like, "Pleased to meet you." Misty smiled and said that she understood it that way too. Soujiro touched the moth's fur. It felt good to pet it. Matsukaze began to bark sharply. The puppy grinned at the silk moth. Himuro waved his hand awkwardly and asked his pet to befriend the insect. The boy sat down next to Matsukaze and stroked him, assuring him that he was also fluffy and that he liked him. Misty suddenly turned her head to the moth and thought about something. She called Soujiro and asked him to give the insect a name. Himuro was surprised. The boy thought for a moment and suggested the name Musubi. The elf asked if the name had any meaning. Himuro explained that it was the name of the god of sericulture, and the moth resembled the silkworm. Musubi sat on Soujiro's head. The boy noticed that the moth liked the new name. Himuro told Misty that now that they had the fabric, he could make even more. Due to the unexpected addition, Soujiro has not yet noticed the terrible mistake he made. Last time, the boy made a table and chairs. Himuro and Misty were sitting at the table with Musubi lying on it. The boy thought about how they now had a place to sit and eat in peace. He thought about it, realizing something. Himuro suddenly jumped up from the table, slamming his hands on it. There was horror on his face. Misty asked in surprise what had happened to Soujiro, and noticed that it looked like he had been stung. The guy replied that he had forgotten to do something very important. Himuro quickly began to create something near his work table. Misty asked if he needed help. The boy exclaimed that he could do it himself. The elf asked Musubi what Soujiro was doing this time. Soujiro did not understand how he could forget about such an important and obvious thing. After a short time, the guy straightened up and put his hands on his hips. He prepared the wooden parts, and the base remained. First, a hole had to be dug. Then, Himuro laid a stone foundation around the hole and built a small hut out of planks. This time, urgency was more important than the strength of the structure. Soujiro created a simple and practical booth. The guy made a hole in the floor above the hole under the booth, and on top of it he placed a smooth log with a hole cut out. On top of that, Himuro placed another board with a hole in the top, and then a lid that could be opened and closed. Soujiro placed the leaves on a small wooden shelf, poured water into the sink, and threw in the griffin's claw. The last thing left was to hang up the silk cloth. The boy exclaimed happily that everything was ready. The booth contained a polished toilet seat and lid, leaves for wiping, a musubi cloth, and a hand-wash basin with a griffin claw inside. Himuro wondered what to do with what would remain below, but decided to think about it later. Right now, it was more important to test the construction. Guy was thinking about complete peace. The toilet was ready, and Misty needed to be told. The girl went inside, latched the door, and looked at the toilet. The elf was puzzled. She asked Soujiro if it wasn't too much for him to make such a beautiful thing for such a matter. The main thing was that the toilet issue was solved. Himuro had made one for Matsukaze too. The next day, Himuro was standing near the table when he suddenly noticed that they had a new guest. Musubi had brought some large animal in his paws. The guest waved a clawed paw at the guy. The beast stood on the ground, and the moth landed on Himuro's head again. The boy was surprised that it was an armadillo. The armadillo began to wave its paws. The boy did not understand anything, and for this reason called Misty. The girl was happy, and exclaimed that Soujiro was being pursued by animal spirits. Misty explained that they were riddles, and they were good at digging and plowing the soil. Himuro wondered if it was done with magic, and that it was convenient. Soujiro thought about it, and named the armadillo Ukatama. He explained that it was a fertility god, and asked the animal if he liked it. Ukatama made a long sound and spread his paws out again. Misty looked at it and called the boy. The girl said with a smile that Ukatama offered to take care of the plants and work with the soil in the toilet. Himuro asked Ukatama if he wanted to compost, and thanked him for it. He asked the elf what to feed him. Musubi ate leaves with salt water. Misty said that riddles eat bark, water, and various fruits. Soujiro thought about it. He said that there would be no problem with the bark, and that there were berries growing in the forest. Misty assured the boy that Ukatama could grow everything himself. The boy called him self-sufficient. In other words, the armadillo only needed soil. Himuro took the shovel in his hands and decided that he would do everything now. First, he needed to uproot the stumps. To do this, first dig up the surrounding soil, and then uproot the stump itself. Unfortunately, Himuro did not have any heavy equipment, and this could take a long time. The boy had to start digging and cutting, digging and cutting, digging and cutting. If you don't dig out the stumps carefully, the roots can get in the way, and it will be very difficult to get rid of them. Himuro got very lazy and put it off until later. Of course, the guy had a shovel created by crafting equipment, but that alone was not enough to easily deal with everything. Soujiro picked up a hook with chains. The guy fixed a hook with chains on an air block that rested on the ground and secured the second hook to a stump. Himuro pulled the chains, and the stump pulled out of the ground with ease. The boy was pleasantly surprised by this. Soujiro didn't even put in any effort, but it was easy. With that condition, he agreed to do the job. The boy thought that it was all about the incredible power of the crafting equipment, but he was glad that it was easy. After that, everything was stable. Himuro uprooted the stumps, and Ukatama rolled them off the field. After some time, the uprooting was finished. The boy asked the armadillo if he had enough space for a vegetable garden. But Ukatama had already started working. Himuro was lying down on his chair with pleasure, glad for the long-awaited break. After a while, he wondered what Ukatama was doing, and decided to take a look. A guy came to the field and started asking about what the beast had managed to do. But he didn't finish. Soujiro was amazed that Ukatama had already finished and dug the ground into neat rows. The boy looked around for the armadillo. Ukatama was sitting on a stump, gnawing on a piece of wood in his hands. Himuro thanked him for the field and asked him to let him know if he needed anything else. Himuro was talking to Misty. He said that Musubi makes silk and fabric, Ukatama makes fertilizer, and now there is no need to throw anything away. They were looking at the puppy that was walking near the riddles. The guy started talking about something else. Soujiro asked why they had such an unusual zoo. A puppy, a moth, and an armadillo. The boy asked why they had so many animals in the first place. Misty suggested that they had come because of the divine aura. There was a cluster of divine energy in the place where Himuro had placed the statue of Anna. Soujiro asked if it was bad. The girl replied that it was very good. She was sure that the guy had such a destiny. Misty asked him to consider that when they met, he had already met a rare creature, and pointed to herself. She winked. Himuro said that if it was fate, then he was glad. He told Mistia that he was very happy to meet her. The girl was surprised. She asked if it was true and looked away, rubbing the back of her head. Himuro smiled and thought that Misty was a very good cook. That day, Mistia killed the boar monster. She herself did not know how she managed to bring it down. Today, one good thing happened after another. In the Adventurers Guild, there was a large crowd inside. A figure in dark clothes approached the counter. The girl working there casually said to hand over the guild card and take off her hood. The man placed the card on the table and the girl thanked him, holding out her hand with several rings on her fingers. The worker read the name on the card and her eyes widened. She realized with horror who was standing in front of her. The girl exclaimed, calling the man by the name of Black Sea Ion. This cry spread throughout the guild and silence ensued. People began to whisper about this man, saying that he was a puny boy, the personal mage of the royal palace. They did not understand what he was doing in the Adventurers Guild. The guild worker behind the counter took the cigarette out of her mouth and raised an eyebrow, asking what such a high-flying bird needed here. Himuro looked at the salt rock he was holding. He said that at this rate, they would run out of salt. Misty was surprised that it happened so quickly. Himuro asked the elf where she got the salt from. She explained that she collected it downstream. Misty said that since they needed it, she was planning on making something else at the same time. The girl said that there was a city in the same direction and suggested going there. Soujiro was a little puzzled. Misty explained that they usually sold salt and many other things there. She sold them what she found in the forest and added that you can also buy ink, dyes, and seasonings there. Hearing this, Himuro was immediately inspired by the idea and was ready to go. He realized that he could try out new recipes. The guy realized that they had nothing to sell right now, but Misty said that would be no problem. She winked and said that they had Himuro himself. Misty and Soujiro decided to go to the city. Musubi went with them. Matsukaze was a monster, so he couldn't be brought to people, and Ukatama looked after him. The two stayed behind to watch the house. Misty said that if they kept going at this pace, they would get there in 3 days or on the morning of the 4th. Himuro realized that it was quite far. Misty awkwardly noted that the elves were moving faster, and she alone would have gotten there faster than with Soujiro. Suddenly, the girl heard something and tensed up. She said that something was approaching from the right. On the way to the city, Himuro and Mistia were bound to encounter trouble. They were attacked by monsters such as horned rabbits. As the horned rabbit flew into a large boulder, the boy and girl turned their attention to the moth using its magic. They began to whisper about how Musubi was strong, even though he was fluffy. Luckily, Misty had the ability to detect monsters, so a surprise attack could be avoided. They moved forward cautiously. Fighting monsters was more common than Himuro could have imagined. The elf was tense. She called out to Soujiro and said that something big was approaching. A huge snake with 2 heads was crawling through the forest between the trees. Its tongues were sticking out. Himuro looked out from behind the tree and thought that the monster was really big. He hid behind the trunk, caught his breath, and ran to the side. He planned to divert the snake's attention to himself. The monster turned both heads in the direction of the noise. Misty must use blades and magic to cut off the snake's head. The girl ran towards the snake, and one of its heads turned towards her, opening its mouth in a predatory manner. Misty swung her blade at it. After that, the elf jumped back to the higher ground. The second head of the snake was rapidly approaching her. Himuro was aimed at the second head. A tree flew at the monster. Misty covered herself from the splinters and dirt. Soujiro thought that if they didn't rush, they could handle everything. He approached the snake's body. Using his strong cane, the boy repelled the monster's attack. Himuro hit the snake with a stick and pinned it to the ground using his pin ability. After he did that, he looked around and said that there would be no more problems. The monster was lying on the ground without 2 heads. The boy thought that if Misty hadn't given him such good advice, he would have been dead already. A little earlier, the girl had said that even if the snake lost its head, it would still be able to move. Misty appeared next to Soujiro and grabbed his shoulder, calling his name. He was a little surprised. Himuro asked the elf if she was hurt. The girl said that everything was fine and asked if Soujiro wanted to go for a walk with her. She smiled awkwardly and a little nervously. Misty noticed that the snake was growing a head. After they crushed the new head, it did not grow back and the monster died. The elf grabbed Soujiro's hands and exclaimed that he was doing well. She could not believe that they had managed to defeat a 2-headed snake. Himuro wondered if it was really that amazing. The guy realized that killing the snake was really hard. If it weren't for the fixation, he could constantly recover. Misty jumped up and down happily and said that the stone from it could be sold for a lot of money. Only now did Soujiro realize why she had said not to worry. They had found goods to sell. The girl said that they had all the bags ready and thanked Musubi, who was carrying the bag in his paws. Misty added that they might find a few more monsters on the way. Himuro agreed. After some time, Himuro made a simple bed to sleep in the forest. It was a hammock, which he hung between two thick trees. The hammock took up almost no space in the bag, and there was no need to sleep on the cold ground. Soujiro applied insect repellent to the rope, thus protecting himself from insects that could crawl up the tree. Himuro lay in the hammock with his eyes closed. He thought about how life had become much easier with musubi. Misty offered to fry some meat. The guy asked to wait a minute. Today's dinner was snake meat and herb soup. The snake meat had a strange smell, but it was quite tasty. Misty told the boy that he would become an experienced adventurer. This forest was a walk for him. Himuro replied with a smile that it was all thanks to the goddess's blessing. The guy also awkwardly added that the life of an adventurer did not suit him. The elf listened to him, bringing a piece of meat to her mouth. At night, Musubi guarded the sleeping Soujiro and Mistia. He flew under the treetops and watched for possible danger. Morning of the third day. Misty happily reported that they had already reached the road, and it was only an hour's walk to the city. Himuro walked next to them, carrying a backpack and Musubi on his back. He noticed that the atmosphere in the forest had changed. The girl clarified that he had noticed this, and explained that this was already a very ordinary forest. Misty said, almost instructively, that the magical power here is not that strong, and for this reason there are not so many monsters, and besides, people exterminate them. Soldiers were recruited to clean up the forest, and they fought fiercely. Local monsters were disrupting people's business by ruining crops and hunting livestock. Himuro raised his hand to his face, thinking that this cycle of life was like a fantasy. Misty said that even small monsters could cause trouble. Soujiro said that magic stones could be obtained by destroying them, and asked if that was good for people. Misty replied that you can't make much money from every little thing, and you can't work off the cost of an army for hunting. For this reason, it wasn't very popular. Himuro expected a slightly different answer. Soujiro and Misty came out of the forest. The boy said that it looked like a road. Misty pointed her finger forward and called Himuro. She said that this was a human city called Bronwals. A soldier expresses surprise at an elf woman bringing someone along, marking an unusual event for him. A young woman with long hair tied up and pointy elf-like ears stands calmly, wearing intricate armor with a fur collar and a pendant. She appears thoughtful. She recalls being called a derogatory name by someone familiar. One character explains that bodies age more slowly in their world, visible just by looking at him. A cheerful girl in a school uniform strikes a confident pose, emphasizing her identity as a Japanese schoolgirl in both spirit and body. She declares this with a bright expression and dynamic stance. Gist: she asserts her identity as a Japanese schoolgirl. A character proudly states, becoming an A-rank adventurer easily and having a cheating skill as a mage. Another character listens quietly, impressed. The main message is about achieving a high rank with special abilities. A young man with tousled hair and wide eyes asks about actions taken regarding a hut he built, showing curiosity and seeking an explanation. A character notices a very sturdy shelter and comments on its robustness, while another character appears to be struggling or coughing nearby. Character discusses joining a legendary sacred forest where local monsters are stronger than expected and magic is weak in battle, making an ideal setting for an ambush but also highly dangerous due to monster detection skills. A character reflects on suffering for 3 full years in the world, conveying a sense of enduring hardship and struggle. Woman talks about wanting to live quietly in the forest, away from monsters, but ending up involved in political games due to her magic. She shares how she became feared and misunderstood by others. Man apologizes, admitting he does not understand the situation fully. A person kneels beside a large, silhouetted figure. The person explains fleeing from local monsters and suddenly finding an impenetrable tent, calming down afterward. The moment shows tension breaking into peace. A woman explains that monsters appeared as soon as she stepped outside, so she settled in a nearby hut. A man notes she lost her underwear during some point in the story. Panel shows a person with a bucket hat smiling, labeled as a new victim elf keeper. Another character contemplates the face nervously, deciding not to dig or restore it. A young man smiles while holding a hammer, explaining it is an instrument, not a weapon. A dark, blob-like creature acknowledges the hammer's strength and its effect on its tentacles, expressing concern for its survival. Characters speak near a simple shelter made from branches. One claims a unique dark magic talent. Another credits Sacred Treasure for creating the shelter and survival. A hooded character clings tightly to a makeshift shelter, declaring refusal to abandon it. Another character explains intent to demolish it, indicating it will become their second home. A character cries intensely, tears streaming down their face. They express relief about finding a house safe from monsters. The character screams a desperate refusal. Two characters are talking. One asks about the absence of tents. The other explains monsters broke them on the second day. A third character vows to protect the first from harm. A young girl covers her face with her hands, standing distressed. A boy nearby asks if she tried returning home. She admits to being lost. Two characters interact. One in pain says his food is gone and stomach hurts badly, adding he has little time left. The other reacts with shock, calling it a nightmare. A man touches his forehead while sweating, appearing somewhat amused or concerned. The text states that the girl cannot survive in the wild. The scene suggests doubt about the girl's survival skills. A character observes a frightened, starving girl who looks weak and dehydrated, predicting she will die from lack of water within a few days. The situation is dire and urgent. Woman with short hair turns back, expressing concern. She warns that someone nearby won't survive long, even without intervention. She calls for attention urgently. A detailed medieval-style building with timber framing and multiple windows appears. Two characters stand in front, observing, while another person is nearby with a cart. The text reveals it as a local trading company. Young man, dressed in medieval attire, extends an inviting hand while asking a girl to join him to his camp. Girl, with wide eyes and short hair covering one eye, closely listens to the proposal. Scene captures moment of invitation and consideration. A character disassembles a finished whip and wishes good luck to another. Two others watch in a forested area, one mentioning the need to get rid of the Japanese schoolgirl. The gist is completion of a task and a new objective. One character asks if the Chigus magic is the other's power, who responds affirmatively and mentions it is shadow manipulation. A character explains that in this world, spell reading is what people call it. He clarifies that this method can be used for more than just dark magic. A man with dark hair contemplates seriously, touching his chin while beads of sweat appear on his face. He recalls a warning about the most dangerous mage in the kingdom, questioning if she is the one. One character watches another who is bent over, sweating and gasping, struggling to breathe while speaking faintly. The watcher denies the identity of the suffering figure. Musubi carries Chigusa, who sits on a swing held by a giant insect. Musubi thinks they oddly suit each other. Narration states, Musubi ended up carrying Chigusa. One character looks at another, who is bent over, sweating and struggling to speak amid coughing and wheezing, while internal dialogue denies the possibility she is the person expected. Musubi carries Chigusa suspended from a large insect, while another character watches and notes their odd compatibility. The narration explains that Musubi ended up having to transport Chigusa. A young man wakes up sweating and yawns, greeting Mistia with good morning, noting it has been a long time since he was woken like this, and another man remarks she hasn't returned yet. A speech bubble contains the phrase, accusing someone of being a proud or haughty merchant. The style is typical of a manga panel, with bold, dramatic font emphasizing the insult. The close-up focuses on character dialogue without showing characters. Boy lies on his back, looking up with a thoughtful expression, noting his head is dirty. A quiet forest scene appears with dappled light through the trees, creating a lonely atmosphere. The boy sits up, brushes his hair back, and then covers his face with his hands as a small creature watches nearby. A man called out loudly, waking a woman struggling inside a tent who apologized for oversleeping while trying to get up. Gist: a loud call wakes a woman struggling to rise from a tent. A man greets Chigusa with good morning while looking slightly nervous. Chigusa appears surprised and speechless initially. A small creature beside the man makes soft noises, adding to the scene's atmosphere. A young woman with long dark hair, dressed in an off-shoulder dress, greets a boy named Sho Chifa with cheerful energy. He looks surprised and asks if she does gymnastics. She apologizes for not being called by her name anymore. Gist: woman greets boy energetically while he questions her activities. A teacher mentions that the boy's brother does not do gymnastics, while the girl asks why. The boy invites the girl to do morning exercises with him, and she agrees. A girl questions another about her wardrobe, suggesting it consists only of a school uniform and a nightgown. A boy stands behind them as the other girl drinks water, noting its good taste, and planning to go to the bathroom next. Male character with dark hair appears slightly embarrassed and speaks about a recent event involving receiving pajamas from Musubi. Another character, cheerful and wearing a small creature on his head, praises Musubi for the gesture. Pajamas are shown as an image above, indicating the gift given before sleep. A boy with a tired expression and sweat on his face has a small creature perched on his head. He reflects on a girl's situation and apologizes for not realizing something earlier. The speech bubble shows a question about getting some kind of panties, highlighting a humorous or awkward topic. A person requests the other not to say something. The other, wearing a frilly outfit, feels a sense of freedom and says everything is fine. Gist. One shows relief while the other asks them to be careful with their words. One character hands another a large, dark claw wrapped in fabric, explaining it will serve as soap. The other character thanks them. A man with a beard questions a younger man with short hair, addressing him directly. The younger man reacts hesitantly, thinking the other man appears large and imposing. The scene depicts an intense, close encounter between the two characters. Young man points to a carefully arranged stone structure beside a flowing river, explaining it slows the current. Another person reacts with interest. A man observes a woman who appears to be walking alone near a body of water. He thinks about her specific smell and concludes she likely hasn't bathed recently after wandering through the forest. Woman apologizes for her unpleasant smell and questions whether someone did not want to wash despite knowing about it. A man reacts to her words with surprise and disbelief. This scene revolves around personal hygiene and confrontation. A man apologizes to a seated woman while explaining he postponed telling her something because she was tired. The woman thanks him for understanding. The gist is the man shows consideration for the woman's condition. A young man smiles gently while telling Chigusa that she is not alone in this. He recalls Elfika explaining the importance of washing, indicating care and guidance. Two characters talk on rocky ground. One comments that the other smells nice and thanks for the compliment. They discuss the importance of maintaining a civilized space. A young woman looks to the side and speaks about a forest where people meet death. A young man contemplates the task ahead, stating the need to level the ground for building a hut. He speaks thoughtfully, planning the next steps carefully. Narrator mentions Chigusa has joined them, and the decision to build huts for new inhabitants, similar to their own dwelling, is made. A lone hut with a chimney is depicted as an example. One character explains using shadow magic and their storage to affect objects, while the other listens attentively. The word shadow is emphasized separately. A man with a beard looks surprised as a woman speaks to him, asking if there's another argument. A younger man asks if he is with her. Gist. An unexpected tension emerges between the characters. A girl offers to create zero gravity if it can help, expressing willingness to assist happily. Another person reacts with surprise and admiration, showing enthusiasm. The girl expresses readiness to accept help with joy. Man cuts bark from wood and slices it into planks. He then places the wood in the shade. Chigusa will store the wood inside. Character breaks wooden planks with a knife. A hand near the destruction uses dark magic to save time and effort. The process usually takes several hours, even with specialized tools. Two characters speak with enthusiasm, one expressing a striking effect, and the other acknowledging with understanding. They agree to continue their effort eagerly. Gist. Characters respond positively to success and decide to proceed. A boy approaches a giant pumpkin labeled Giant Skaya Taivka. Boxes explain that mass does not change despite weightlessness. The scene clarifies that mass remains constant even if weight is reduced to zero. Young man gestures with a thumbs up and asks for a board to be brought to him. A small character explains that holding something light does not require much strength. The character notes pushing something is a different matter, illustrated by pushing a large pumpkin. A young man stands working on a wooden structure, fastening large panels to form an outer wall. The setting shows the framework of a building exposing beams and planks. Dark, twisting tentacles encroach on the construction site, curling around the wooden frame and panel edges. A person sits calmly on a bench, while numerous large, dark tentacles with slick surfaces extend and coil around and beneath the bench structure. Text narrates that Chigusa controls the tentacles precisely with fingertip movements. Work proceeds at an even faster pace due to this ability. A person thanks another for their hard work, complimenting dark magic and comparing it to construction techniques. A large wolf-like creature asks if sitting too long caused pain, receiving a normal response. Two characters discuss the effort put into something, with one surprised by the other's claim of trying hard. The other responds with gratitude but seems unsure. A third person comments on the speed of construction and wishes the knower wasn't present. A man waves goodbye energetically while running away, shouting a phrase. Two other men respond, one wishing good luck and the other acknowledging understanding. The scene depicts a lively farewell. A character smiles with closed eyes, laughing softly. Another asks how the first character's stomach is doing, and the reply confirms no pain. Two people discuss food. One comments that the other's stomach seems to be improving. The other mentions that bear stew is served for dinner today. Characters discuss the bear meat stew they have. One comments on not hunting and relying on bear meat. Girl excitedly notes the large pot. Boy compliments her for not giving up the good meat. Bear image relates to the meat used. Night scene shows trees and silhouetted, with text boxes explaining the speaker's optimistic attitude. A close-up of a young man looking confident while rationalizing no issues should arise, given the mystical context. Two people in the upper panel look surprised and slightly worried, standing outdoors under a partly cloudy sky with trees behind them. The girl smiles nervously. The boy sweats and stares ahead. In the lower panel, an armored woman with long hair and pointed ears watches sternly in front of a dark background. The scene conveys unexpected tension and seriousness. Man tries to make Chigusu wash her head in the river before the return of Misty. He recalls something about a bucket at that moment. Characters calculate the internal angles of a decagon, dividing the sum to find one angle and then half of it as 72 degrees. A decagonal figure is shown with one internal angle labeled 72 degrees. The note states that boards must fit together at a 72-degree angle. Two characters discuss measurements, emphasizing small differences in width and advising against large deviations, while one holds a measuring tool. Meanwhile, a wooden container gradually narrows toward the bottom, with small wood pieces scattered nearby. Hands shape wooden boards into a slightly rounded form, pressing them together for easy angle adjustment. Speech mentions craft tools can easily accomplish this. A hand adjusts a hexagonal ring in front of a small dog peeking out. The text explains cutting excess parts that protrude. A person steps down onto a stone surface, shown only from the lower leg and foot. The speech bubble reveals frustration directed at an artist, using strong language. Gist. The character expresses annoyance toward an artist. Character sets up a woodworking plane to smooth out uneven surfaces, evident from shavings scattered around, preparing to level the wood precisely. Two characters prepare a bathing tub, confirming it is ready. One character proposes filling it with water to check for leaks. They show readiness and teamwork toward testing the tub. A young man speaks, noticing the increasing number of people around him. He expresses how his desire to create something new has grown more interesting with this change. A character warns another to avoid making noise while bathing, because monsters may come. Another character, submerged and surrounded by tentacles, practices shadow control techniques. A third character remarks on a fish nearby and doubts their chances of defeating it. A young man with sweat on his forehead speaks with a calm expression. He reflects on someone's craziness and silently sinking. He questions if the slime wanted to kill while attacking others. Three characters are in a cracked, barren landscape. One man coughs and apologizes, worried. A girl lies on the ground unconscious, while another girl with pointed ears stands nearby admonishing caution and silence. The situation suggests a recent danger or attack with concern for the girl's survival. Two characters converse while sitting. One explains that some people buy items for beauty. They discuss how low-ranking adventurers earn money, noting that even weak slime leaves marks behind. Woman examines small round objects scattered on the ground and discusses the difficulty of killing creatures without proper weapons due to the strong local slime presence. She confirms the remaining quantity is considerable. A man and a woman talk closely. The woman explains how one slime losing its core is absorbed by a nearby slime. The man acknowledges the difficulty of handling a horde. A woman explains how killing one enemy strengthens the one next to it. She shows two objects to illustrate her point, while small armored figures battle slime creatures. An older man wearing a distinctive hat and glasses addresses others politely, apologizing for a disturbance someone caused. He wears formal attire with a high collar and buttons. His expression is calm but serious. A young man with spiky hair speaks, questioning if they need to kill multiple targets simultaneously. He looks concerned and responds that it sounds difficult. The conversation reveals a plan involving simultaneous action. Three characters discuss magic. Woman warns not to use dark magic when bathing in the river. Man considers the material interesting and another world worthy of study. A girl happily comments that there can never be too many spirit beasts while talking to a boy who is looking at her. Another girl excitedly announces a new child and asks if someone introduced him, greeting him with enthusiasm. The scene shows interaction and greetings among the characters. Two similar creatures are shown, one labeled as named Kotama and the other Ukatama. One character says he cannot distinguish them at first glance, and another character promises to return and make it easier to tell them apart. A character with a cape walks away while saying something about bows as girly hobbies. Three small creatures stand nearby. Another character with cat ears and ribboned hair reacts with surprise, asking what is wrong, while a dark-haired character apologizes nervously. Woman with short light hair suggests that ribbons can be used for purposes other than bows. She worries something might need to be wrapped and holds up two fingers while sweating nervously. Two characters converse about a hobby involving ribbons. One explains the ribbons were found accidentally and not carried everywhere intentionally. The other reassures the hobby is common and not scary. A character urges Chigusa to keep a secret from Soujiro. Chigusa feels awkward and admits that the hobby doesn't suit her. Another character reacts with surprise at Chigusa running away. A young man with dark hair and a slight smile speaks, explaining he saw and heard everything and thought he could stop the situation if it went wrong. He apologizes quietly as sweat beads on his face. Characters discuss personal hobbies and the importance of not feeling ashamed about what one likes. One character reflects on doing what they enjoy, despite it being unsuitable for an office company. Three characters stand outside near buildings, engaged in conversation. One figure addresses the elf-like woman about an early arrival here. She responds with a smile, mentioning unforeseen circumstances, while a male companion listens quietly. A young woman confronts a man named Soujiro, accusing him of unfair behavior and flirting with her casually. She points a finger at him while blushing and sweating. Woman walks alone, reflecting on losing to an elf girl and leaving without her brother. She considers bringing flowers to apologize and notes the need to be ready for rain. Two characters discuss construction materials for an outdoor area. One thinks about a barbecue zone with a kitchen roof and fire shelter, suggesting not to use wood but concrete. The other notes the first often thinks about remarkable things. One character kneels with hands clasped, pleading for forgiveness and begging not to be expelled. Another stands nearby, denying anger or the need for an apology. The scene centers on a tense, emotional exchange. A young man in a vest points upwards while explaining they have all the materials to make Japanese concrete, recalling a past conversation about shoes. The scene includes a note about clay-based concrete used historically for floor reinforcement, called Czar's concrete. The essence is that they have everything needed to make traditional Japanese concrete. A character with short dark hair tied back asks if something can be made. Another bubble states materials needed: red clay, slaked lime, and gravel. Two characters discuss the possibility of finding bird eggs for food, debating the safety and edibility of wild versus domesticated eggs. Character looks at an egg in a frying pan, contemplating breaking it to check if a bird is inside. They express uncertainty about how else to verify this. A girl cries loudly that she will never be able to eat eggs again. A boy apologizes and asks her to calm down. Narration states she needed some time to calm down. An open wooden shelter with a picnic table underneath stands in a grassy area. Surrounding trees and a peaceful environment are visible. The speech bubbles suggest valuing open spaces but cautioning about rain, advising to cover something for protection. Gist: open spaces are good, but require rain protection. A young man greets, while a smiling woman with elf ears explains they have been through much with someone named Soujiro. The scene shows familiarity and shared history between characters. A man with glasses and a hat speaks anxiously, sweating profusely. He reveals an elf girl has brought a boyfriend after 20 years of no one coming. The gist is that an elf girl brings a boyfriend after a long time. A young man smiles and explains that both tasty food and a good place to eat are important. Neglecting small details makes food taste like sand. Another character questions the seriousness of this view. Character affirms that Chigusa should also feel comfortable here while holding a cup. A dollhouse is shown in detail, with a wooden exterior and miniature furniture visible inside. One character states the need to practice before advancing to something larger. Another character expresses enjoyment in engaging with such activities despite doubts about being just a dreamer. 4 characters gather around a small model house, while one enthusiastically calls it cute and small. 2 others question if it's a plan and inquire about their activity. 1 describes it as excellent home practice. 3 characters discuss staying in an attic. 1 reacts with surprise. Another insists it will be fine. A dog barks. They debate the attic's suitability. Woman explains she killed something big and needs help. Man instructs to take Chigusu to the river and says he will come soon. Others agree and respond affirmatively. 2 men shake hands formally, introducing themselves in a businesslike manner. A woman stands between them, observing the interaction with a neutral expression. The man on the right smokes a pipe, adding a casual contrast to the formal handshake. A man in glasses asks another about their relationship, while offering small incentives for sharing details. The other man reacts nervously and laughs awkwardly. Gist: a probing conversation about personal relations with a hint of coercion. A young man stands beside a woman with long hair and a serious expression. She tells him to come inside. Narrator states being made nervous from the very start. 2 characters sit in an elegant room with chairs and a chandelier, discussing business and requesting to see the product. Gist: initial nervousness leads to a business discussion in a refined setting. A young man stands smiling calmly in a bustling workshop with various workers and tools around, expressing relief that no incident occurred due to Misty. A man narrates that they bought kitchen utensils along with various spices. He lists pepper, saffron, garlic, and vinegar as part of the purchases. A man with dark hair and a goatee greets a younger man, asking if he finished shopping and if he is an artist. Man shows confident body language and focused eyes. The younger man listens quietly, seen from behind. A man with dark hair mentions his name is Sedek and asks how a deal went. Another man with light hair replies, "The deal went well, thanks to someone's help." Both express happiness and satisfaction about the news. A young man looks up attentively and asks if another lives in the sacred forest, seeking confirmation about a person's dwelling place. A knight informs a man that it is time to do his job regarding Lady Elfika and her companion. The man asks for an entrance fee, which the knight promptly hands over. A woman confirms the payment with a response. 2 men converse about living difficulties. 1 man questions if there are problems preventing simple living. The other man hesitates, saying it is hard to explain. 2 speech bubbles appear over a detailed forest scene. The characters assert the forest belongs to no one and doubt any human claims ownership of the sacred forest. 2 characters speak near barrels and crates. 1 acknowledges understanding and vows to remember. The other asks about life there. A man explains the difficulty of cutting down a thin tree, listing the need for many hours, several axes, and the constant disturbance by local monsters, represented by an angry eagle monster hybrid. 2 men engage in a conversation. 1 man confidently states he calmly chops trees and finds it simple. The other man responds by saying it is not difficult and calls him funny. A man discusses the quality of wood from a sacred forest, asking if it is true. Another person questions whether he came to trade wood or magical materials. The conversation reveals 1 is a warrior or adventurer. A man with a goatee speaks seriously about a recent arrival. Another character listens with a staff on shoulder. They discuss the most dangerous mage in the country arriving recently. 2 men discuss the guild and a sacred forest, mentioning the unusual arrival of a prominent guest. 1 advises the other to visit the guild if a conflict arises. A man with a beard and mustache looks ahead seriously and asks a question, standing assertively. He wears a shirt with rolled-up sleeves and suspenders. Close-up of another person's hand is seen alongside. A young man smiles gently, while expressing simple desires about cooking and eating tasty food. He says nothing special is on his mind. A boy and a girl stand outside, with a castle visible in the distance. The boy looks confused and thinks about why someone has a certain expression. The scene focuses on his puzzled reaction. A female character with long hair appears suddenly, apologizing to a male character named Soujiro for making him wait. He notices suddenly she vanished, prompting concern from both characters. The female explains she was chatting with a local, dismissing any issues. A man sits with elbows on knees and hands intertwined under his chin, looking downward in contemplation. He questions the distance the elf girl keeps and remarks on her bringing a boy along. The man shows concern about the elf girl's behavior and the presence of the boy. One man greets another at the door, asking how he is and why he needs advice. The other man, wearing glasses and a hat, complains about his rude behavior despite his invitation. The gist is a tense conversation about manners. A man with thin glasses and a mustache wears a hat and looks with a sly expression. He asks about the Lord's dignity, questioning it sharply. A man with wavy mid-length hair and a goatee laughs heartily, engaging in a spirited conversation. He questions his own dignity humorously, contrasted by another speaker naming a viscount. The scene captures a lively exchange focused on identity and honor. Two men discuss a topic involving an elf girl. One man confirms the other wanted to talk about it. The second man expresses relief that the other came to talk. Characters discuss a large, high-quality magical stone and iron from a big snake, emphasizing the item's exceptional quality. A voice expresses doubt about being able to pay properly for something described as amazing material. The speaker notes it would take dozens of nights to conquer the monster referenced. The gist is that the material is formidable and undervalued. A man with a confident expression claims any nobleman would buy the treasure. Another man, annoyed, argues that any loser could easily sell it and insists nothing funny is happening here. Man with glasses justifies giving luxury items in exchange as an unfair price. Smiling man says he will visit the city and reminds not to forget the agreed deal. Characters move through a quaint town with steep rooftops and stone buildings. Trees and hills surround the area, creating a natural backdrop. Text explains the town produces goods only found in a sacred forest. Man questions if money was given. Another notes, Soujiro seems like a skilled trader. A comment claims Soujiro caused lifelong debt. One character mentions another refusing money and warns that carrying something will be heavy. A second character states they did not even allow sending a check to him. One character reacts with a dramatic expression while holding their face. Two characters sit opposite each other at a table. One character points at the other and speaks loudly. Tension arises from a debt being discussed. An elf smiles confidently, making a vow about a promise made to elves centuries ago. Two men discuss the sincerity and history of this ancient promise. Man with tied-back hair sits in a chair, speaking. He comments on Soujiro's equal treatment towards an elf girl and mentions Soujiro indebting another person despite their first meeting. Basic message. Man critiques Soujiro's behavior with the elf girl and debt issue. A character with long hair looks to the side while speaking. The speech bubble indicates a comment about someone changing because of another person. The focus is on change influenced by interaction. A man with glasses and earrings reports that a woman now arrives much earlier and buys significantly more than before. He questions whether they planned something in the sacred forest. A man with dark hair and a goatee contemplates, considering the strength of someone who possesses a magical stone, suggesting this person might surpass him and even the entire squad. A young man with short, dark hair and bright eyes looks directly ahead, smiling softly. He wears a high-collared shirt, presenting a gentle and pleasant demeanor. Two speech bubbles frame him, describing him as a nice and sweet youth, and mentioning an external viewpoint. Man reclines, discussing someone cutting trees in a sacred forest daily without problems. Speaker highlights the frequency and ease of the action. Two characters walk through a town street, surrounded by people. A female character explains the town's popularity and its 20-year history to a male character. The male character calls the place peaceful. Man with glasses and a hat ponders something seriously while sweating. He questions if someone is really human and doubts a statement made was a joke. The main idea is his uncertainty about another person's nature. A man speaks about a powerful mage who recently arrived in town, mentioning the mage's extraordinary firepower surpassing a fleet of warships. He expresses surprise at feeling fear from a human twice in his life. A dark-cloaked mage appears suddenly amid a forest setting filled with shadows. The narration questions the intent of this black mage in the sacred woods. The scene sets a mysterious and tense tone. Man with dark hair and beard closes eyes, sweating slightly, expresses dread that things will end badly. He compares his feeling to a bone stuck in the throat, implying discomfort and fear. A stern older man holding papers reprimands with authority. Two smaller figures react strongly, showing frustration and shock. Dialogue revolves around respect and forced work, even beyond death. A character with pointed ears and short hair speaks with determination. She promises to return later after finding the stone salt, indicating a planned departure and return. Two characters converse. One says he must not go. The other assures she always manages rock salt extraction well. They show acceptance and an apology. A character with a large backpack stands facing away. The dialogue reveals the baggage is heavier than expected, and they decided to return home first. A man with short hair and armor talks to a glowing, moth-like creature hovering in front of him. He asks the creature if it can guide him somewhere first, addressing it as Musubi. A wooden birdhouse stands fortified, with arrows dangerously close, yet the structure remains intact, showing its durable craftsmanship and safety inside. A character with wavy hair forms an OK gesture with one hand while speaking. She mentions being familiar with the local leader who owes her something. Gist: she knows the local head personally. A wooden birdhouse with a small circular entrance hole is shown. The narration reflects on the object's likely preservation if left undisturbed. The speaker considers personal will as a factor in the object's condition. A young man puts on a large backpack and talks about splitting from Misty and heading to a shelter. A creature resembling a winged cat stands nearby, and a makeshift shelter is visible in the background. The man emphasizes the importance of cleaning up after oneself. A female elf with long hair tied back sits on a board near a campfire. She wears a detailed outfit with fur and smiles with closed eyes, holding a stick over the fire. She mentions missing a hot meal made by Soujiro, while another narrator notes misty weather. A man with a large backpack arrives at a forest clearing with a small, triangular tent. A winged creature hovers nearby, and the man comments on feeling nostalgic. He states he reached his first base 2 days later. A young man with a cheerful expression raises his fist, as if motivating himself or others. Speech bubbles indicate a call to start cleaning. The scene conveys a sense of readiness and action. A young man stands at the edge of a dark cave, questioning why it is so dark inside. A small creature sharply pulls on his arm, causing him to react with surprise. A dark triangular entrance in a forest setting suggests a hidden place. A male character with a small creature on his shoulder reacts with caution and sweat on his face. Youth spots a bear and grimaces. He grips an object defensively, noticing the creature intends to kill him. Bear growls menacingly, showing claws. A young man wields a hammer defensively while a small winged creature hovers near him. A fierce bear charges towards them, creating a tense confrontation. Gist: the man prepares to defend against the charging bear. A man in a suit recoils as a large hand appears, seemingly controlled by shadows. The text mentions manipulation by Chigusa's shadows, emphasizing control over the hand. A boy points angrily at another, accusing them of insulting him since childhood. Two chibi figures comment on the situation. Characters express recognition and past grievances. A massive bear with multiple octopus tentacles attacks a young man who stands ready to face it. The creature roars and speaks a single word. The scene depicts a sudden and intense confrontation. A character stands with blood dripping down their face, expressing concern. Another character discusses a weapon with a mechanical insect while observing the scene from a distance. The tension and unease permeate the moment. A figure examines a bear's head, commenting on its identity and noticing panties hanging from the bear's mouth. Gist: they discover a bear's head with panties. Boy notices a small tent in the forest and asks if someone is there. Voice from tent denies presence at first, then admits presence. Tent's occupant seems nervous. A character reacts with shock and confusion at a strange, sticky substance. Another character questions if it is Musubi. The scene centers on the unexpected appearance of this substance. Two characters react with shock and confusion as they appear to be upside down, suspended by their feet. One screams about falling, the other questions being hung by the feet. The scene suggests disorientation and surprise. A young man looks to the side with sweat on his face, surprised by the presence of a Japanese schoolgirl. He questions the reason for her being there and her school uniform. A character hangs upside down, tears streaming down their face, emitting a drawn-out sound. A nearby text box states they will deal with something later. The scene shows distress and delayed response. Character with wide eyes and tears recalls Musubi's unkind behavior and apologizes for not stopping it sooner. A young man approaches a tent, observing that a woman inside is very frightened and unlikely to talk. He introduces himself as Soujiro Himuro and asks her name. A boy wonders why someone called him a certain way and asks quietly for the reason. A girl appears cheerful and prompts him to consider the name. The boy looks confused and ponders the question silently. Two characters exchange casual apologies and reassurances about an unspecified situation. One admits fault for wanting to appear dramatic, showing sweat and a strained smile. This scene captures a tense but humorous interaction. One character expresses extreme discomfort and thoughts about different ways to commit suicide, mentioning hanging, harakiri, and jumping in front of a train. Another character responds by asking if they can stop coming up with increasingly elaborate methods of suicide. The exchange reveals a distressing discussion on self-harm. A boy looks to the side, speaking with slight concern. He asks if a train was mentioned and questions the girl's name as if surprised. The girl simply replies with affirmation. The boy questions the girl about a train and her name. A young person with short dark hair and wide eyes sits cross-armed on a wooden floor, dressed in a dark hoodie. Man expresses discomfort about being addressed by his family name. Woman questions if that is too much. Scene shows speech bubbles and a stack of plates. Character A expresses relief if character B calms down and comes out. Character B responds, "They won't do anything more." Character B apologizes for laughing. Conversation ends with silence. A person speaks about being Japanese and similar to another person. Another figure questions the truth of this statement. The conversation revolves around identity and trust. A girl speaks softly, asking if the boy is new to the world and wonders if many like him exist. The boy thinks silently, then confirms it is so. A character with a sly smile and dark hair tied in a ribbon crouches low on the ground in a shaded, cluttered area. She speaks about her 4 years living in this world and mentions how beings like them are rare here. Dialogue bubbles suggest a secretive, possibly confrontational conversation. Two characters discuss school uniforms. One asks if the other wears the uniform just for fun. The other admits to not technically finishing school. A soldier wearing medieval armor stands by a fortified castle gate, greeting with a phrase. The gate is large, made of stone, with 2 guards posted on each side, holding spears.